one of the issues we have in the West is that we don't properly define the problem of Russia. And one of the reasons why this happens is we have a class of people I call the Putin whisperers. These are these fake academics. They're not fake. I mean, they have degrees. Michael McFaul has a degree. He's a professor at Stanford. But they're fake Russia experts. He's not an expert on Russia. He's an American propagandist. Angela Stent at Georgetown's the same thing. She's not an expert on Russia. She's an American propagandist. Fiona Hill, an American propagandist. These are people that have a vision of what Russia should look like. Amazing that Westerners, outsiders, have a vision of what Russia should look like. And they've been in favor of implementing policies to achieve that objective. And that objective is to break Russia up into smaller constituent parts. You see, we're very fearful of the size of Russia, the physical size of Russia, but also what's contained in that landmass. A great deal of the world's resources. And we are nervous that a single nation has access to all these resources because they can not only become self-sustainable in certain critical industries, but they will be able to help others. And in this case, others means China, with the world's largest population, with a modernizing industrial base, modernizing infrastructure. And now you bring China and Russia together in this nexus of economic capacity, and it's an unbeatable force. This is why the Trans-Eurasian Economic Union that's being pushed by the Russians and the Chinese is a serious thing. I don't think the United States has properly defined what's going on in Russia. We don't understand what their strategic objectives are vis-a-vis China. We don't understand what China's strategic objectives are vis-a-vis Russia. Take a look at Vladimir Putin's meeting with Joe Biden in June of 2021. When Joe Biden came out of that without prompting, he turned to the media and said, well, I think Putin should not get close to China, that's a bad thing, that China has, ill intent towards them, etc. The president was totally out of touch because you see Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have had great relations for a long time, friendly relations. I mean, like friends, real friends. These are guys that meet each other for their birthdays. They socialize. They make pancakes together. They make they cook. They have a really good relationship. And how insulting is it then for the United States president to say, I have to educate Putin on China? I'm pretty sure Putin knows more about China than you do, Mr. Biden. I think he's understands the relationship. Putin gave a speech even in the aftermath of the recent visit by Xi Jinping. Putin gave a speech where he said, we have our history with China. I mean, he's not pretending that everything has been roses with China. We had our history, he said. We have our problems, but we are in a situation where we don't have any other choice. And this isn't a bad choice. It's not as though we have to hold our nose on this. This isn't a bad choice. This is a good choice. It requires some changes on our part, but the West has compelled us to make these changes. So we are going to make these changes. Now we have this relationship that is stronger than any alliance. And I know a lot of people in the West roll their eyes when they hear that it's just Russian propaganda. Well, if you take a look at the NATO Charter, for instance, people like to talk about the strength of the NATO Charter. But the NATO Charter is far more restrictive than it is expansive, meaning that once you join NATO, a lot of controls come down on you because it's a negotiated agreement on a consensus basis. It means you've subordinated a lot of your sovereignty to the totality of an alliance that in some instances is deeply divided. Now we take Russia, China. There's no treaty, none whatsoever. So when people say, well, what are the limitations on it? There are no limitations. They can go anywhere they want it to go, or nothing can happen. And it doesn't change the impact. They still are friendly nations. This allows for a very pragmatic approach. To give you an example of this pragmatism, recently, Russia had signed some concessions with Vietnam, the Republic of Vietnam, for oil exploration in the vicinity of the South China Sea in waters that are contested with China. And Russia has been actively drilling. They have their rigs there. They're drilling it for joint exploitation. And recently, a Chinese naval vessel came and sailed through there, and one of their, an act of intimidation, I guess, against the Vietnamese. There were people that were shouting because this happened right after Xi Jinping returned back to China. And people were shouting, saying, "Oh, look, this is proof that China doesn't take Russia seriously. This is garbage relationship. They lied. There's tensions there." And I asked a senior Russian official about this, a former diplomat who, old China hand, Maria Zakharova's father, by the way, used to be a diplomat in Beijing for many years. And he said, look, Russia's always been pragmatic about these things. Russia's not taking sides. Russia is doing what it does and will continue to do that. And in some instances, this may cause problems with the Chinese, but the nature of the relationship between Russia and China is that because there is no treaty constraints or treaty that defines things, Russia can be pragmatic about what's going on in these oil fields, but still reach out to the Chinese about gas deals and other deals to bring in Belts and Roads Initiative, to ask Xi Jinping to make a phone call on behalf of a potential peace. Why? Because there are no limitations to this relationship. This relationship can go in any direction whatsoever. Imagine that. Imagine the maturity of your approach towards interacting with other nations, where it wasn't a zero-sum game where you had to win, or because if you didn't win, then it was a loss. What if you actually just sat down and respected everything and treated each thing separately? You didn't have some all-encompassing manifest destiny type plan that said America must rule the world through a rules-based international order, but instead you said we'll take each thing, one at a time and treat it the way it deserves to be treated, with the respect, but we don't allow this to actually, dictate this outcome. Where would we be today if that was the approach we took? I would hasten to believe that we would be far more deeply entrenched in the Middle East because nations would want us to be there. But when we decide that our task is to illegally occupy a third of Syria to steal oil to finance a terrorist organization that fights against an ostensible NATO ally, think of what I just said there, the complexity of that. Then because that's what we do. That's what America does. But had we not done this, where could we be? We could be in there, a player, still able to ask our friends to manipulate the oil market to our economic benefit because we're friends, we're friendly. There's no reason to fear us. But now nobody saw. I mean, Mohammed bin Salman just came out and said, "I don't care what Joe Biden thinks about me anymore. I'm done with him. I'm done with American opinion." Saudi Arabia has divorced itself from the United States orbit, and this is a game-changing event.
Yeah, the world is certainly changing, and NATO expansion is definitely at the heart of it. And the expansion of this chaos and destruction that you speak of, the way the U.S. relates to the world, is helping to lay a foundation for this. And it, as you said, I think it goes hand in hand. It's like it's not a bad option for Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, for much of the Arab world, much of the African continent. It's not a bad option to come together and try to figure out something else, and not least because, well, the other option is actively harming you every step of the way. But I
Not just
wanted to,
militarily, but economically. I don't know. Did you see what Marco Rubio said the other day?
right? I think it was something about he was admitting fear of this development, I believe, right?
Yeah, he basically said, because Brazil sat down with China and said, "We're done with the dollar. We're going to do business in the yuan." And he's like, "Oh my God, the fourth largest economy. I mean, the largest economy in the southern hemisphere is decoupling from the dollar. We won't be able to sanction them anymore. We won't be able to exert our influence on them. They're going to function as a sovereign nation, and this is a terrible thing." Imagine. I mean, at least he was honest. I have to give him, straight up props for, wow, what honesty. But then the spokesperson for the White House, I'll mispronounce her name, so I don't want to say it to insult her. But she basically was talking about this, and she said, those nations that seek to decouple the dollar, you are offending the American people, because the well-being of the American people depends on the ability of the dollar to be the supreme currency, the reserve currency, so that we can leverage this to enhance the da 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 da. And she doesn't even listen to what she's saying. She's basically saying that if a nation decides that they don't want to do business with the dollar, that that America will be compelled to intervene, because we have to have you do business with the dollar, because otherwise you're harming the economy of America, and that's an insult to the American people. The arrogance and the hubris. Look, I don't want the dollar to collapse. I don't know how about you, Danny, but I get paid in dollars, and and the dollars are what I take to the grocery store, and it sort of upsets me sometimes when the price of food goes up everywhere. I mean, we have a favorite diner that we go to every weekend for breakfast. Typical American diner, and they apologized. They came in and said we had to raise our prices, and I'm talking about not an insignificant raise, because the price of food has gone up. You see that if you go to restaurants, you go to the grocery store, it's there. I want the dollar to be stable. I'd like the dollar to have value, because that way, when I earn $1,000, I can buy $1,000 worth of stuff. I don't want to earn $1,000 and only be able to buy $800 worth of stuff, or $600 worth of stuff, because you know what? Inflation is making the value of my dollar decrease, and my employer, by the way, it's not Russia. My employer is not giving me more money. It's not like my employer is going, oh gosh, look, the cost of living cost you 12.5% in the last year. Yeah, 12.5%. That's inflation and everything else. Some people say it's even higher. That means that instead of earning $100, I'm now earning, here we go with my military math, but it's going to be somewhere in the area of 87.5%, or $87.5. That ain't $100. So, and then next year, when you factor it in, it's going to be, around $70. That ain't $100, but I'm only, my pay hasn't been adjusted. I need the dollar to do well. I need the dollar to be strong, and it's not. It's failing. But that's not a international security issue. That's just the stupidity of American policy. Hey, I tell you what, Marco Rubio and lady spokesperson of the White House, whose name I can't pronounce, stop stealing money. For instance, if you're going to call the dollar the world's reserve currency, and people are going to have faith in that, but then you go and you steal $700-800 billion of Russian sovereign wealth for no legal reason, just because you're mad at Russia. Understand that the rest of the world's going to sit there and go, whoa. I mean, would you, Danny, again, would you put your money in a bank that just arbitrarily wake up and say, yeah, we're taking your account? No.
I hesitate with the banks. I mean, now, like, what?
Yeah, now
if
it's
banking collapse. It's like, oh shit, what's gonna happen to our money?
No, that's right. But we don't want to give away our money like that. So I'm not a fan of the collapse of the dollar. I don't want anybody to think the fact that I'm out there defending other people's sovereign rights, that this makes me happy. But it's not their fault. The reason why they don't want the dollar is we made it toxic. We steal your money. We sanction you. Listen to what Marco Rubio said. If you break your way from the dollar, he's not talking about denied, economic opportunities. He's saying we can't sanction you. We can't punish you. As if the only thing, the only tool in the American toolbox is, from a non-military standpoint, is the militarization of the economy. We are going to sanction you. We are going to punish you. That's the only thing we think. Look at what we're doing around the world. The only thing we talk about is sanctions. We never talked about going out there and engaging in a Belts and Roads initiative type thing. The last G7 meeting last summer, Biden's in there, we're going to come up with the counter to the Chinese Belts and Roads initiative, a $600 billion fund. Really, Joe? $600 billion? But it wasn't, was it? No, it was really $300 billion in contributions, and then you wanted the private sector to kick in $300 billion, but they're not going to. So it's a $300 billion fund, which nobody's funding, nobody's putting money on. So it's a $0 fund. And you want that to be competing with what? In the last decade, what has China put into BRI? $7 to $10 trillion? Trillion. That's with a T, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lot of money. And we can't match that. We can't match that. We could if we weren't busy stealing money and sanctioning people, if we were focused on sound economic principles and working with other nations without moral strings attached, coming in saying, here's a contract, but first you have to buy into our abortion policies, you have to buy into this, you have to buy into that. The nations are going, we're done with that, we're finished. And they're jumping ship, and they're all jumping ship at the same time. This is problematic. This is a problem for the American economy.
Indeed, indeed. And I think it's a good time to get to the Patreon questions now as we close up here. But yeah, no, everything you said is 100% true. The dollar has been, it's been weaponized. The greenback, the paper, there's nothing about that screams, oh no, danger, danger. It's when the politics, the policies, as you said, the weaponization of the dollar to destroy other countries through sanctions, and also using military power, using military might to enforce the sanctions, to enforce also the indebtedness and the inequality of it. It doesn't have to be like that, but it is. And that's why countries all around the world, led by China and Russia, are saying, it's kind of a domino effect. It's, you hear Egypt, all across Africa now. You have the Nigeria, you have the president of Ghana, president of Nigeria, as Kamala Harris, and all the other U.S. officials that have visited over the last 6 or so months all across Africa. They're all saying, no, forget all that China talk. We don't want to hear it. We want to be trading with China. We will make our own choice.